Elites are the biggest run killers in Slay the Spire too, and if your runs keep dying to them, it's usually not bad luck. Each elite has a pattern, and once you understand them, these fights become way more consistent. So in this guide, I'm going through every single elite, what they do, what actually gets you killed, and how to beat each one consistently so that you stop losing runs to the same fights over and over and over again. So why even face elites in the first place? First of all, you can get relics from elites. There's no real other place to get relics except for like shops and treasure chests, but elites are going to provide you that special reward at the end of every single fight. And 90% of the time, it's going to help you in your run in some way. You have a higher percentage chance to get a rare card from an elite than you do from a normal fight. So most of the time, your very first rare card in a run is going to come from an elite fight. You also get more gold from elite fights that you can obviously take to the shop and maybe go buy some more relics. And most importantly, elite fights are way more predictable than fighting hard hallway fights. When it comes to a hard hallway fight, you have no idea what enemy you're going to run into. But when it comes to elite fights, you know that it could be one of 3 different elites in an act. And then after you faced the first elite, you know the next one can't be that first one. So the next one is going to be one of the other 2 elites. That is a massive advantage because you never know what you're going to run into on hard hallway fights. And it's really hard to avoid them, especially at higher ascension levels, because those question marks can easily be one of those hard hallway fights. And in my personal experience, hard hallway fights are just as tough as elites because they hit you for a ton of damage, they don't take a ton of damage, and then at the end of it, you don't get the rewards that you get from elite fights. Fighting elites and getting those relics and possible rare cards may be the difference between you winning and losing a run. The first elite that we're going to talk about is Skulking Colony. And before I talk about this, I got all this information from slaythespire2.gg. I'm going to leave the link down in the description below so that you can go check out the site yourself and see the enemy patterns. Now, one thing that I have to say is that this information is for the current beta patch, which is 0.0.103. Because we are in early access, there is a ton of things that are going to change over time. The only problem with Skulking Colony is this has been the most changed elite out of everyone. They may end up changing this again. It seems like every week they change Skulking Colony a little bit because it's either too hard or too weak. And in my opinion, where Skulking Colony stands right now, I think this is one of the easiest elites in the game. I know a lot of people get annoyed at it because you can only damage it so much. As you can see, it has Hardened Shell. This creature cannot lose more than 20 HP per turn. So all that means is that it's going to take some extra turns in order to actually beat Skulking Colony. Its HP is at 75 on the higher ascension levels. The shortest amount of time that you can take to kill it is like 4 turns. It's really hard to do that, obviously. This is really, honestly, a simple fight to win. Basically, all you need for Skulking Colony is to have a solid amount of block or damage mitigation cards in order to actually defeat it. Every 3 turns, Skulking Colony gives itself a little bit of strength. It gives itself 2 strength, or if you're on the higher ascension levels, 3 strength. It's really not that bad. The only problem with the strength gain is that piercing stabs multiple strike attack. That's the 4th attack that Skulking Colony does. But as long as you can block that, then you'll be fine. And you're probably not really getting hit with it more than twice in a fight because it happens on the 4th turn. And then the next time that happens is the 8th turn. As long as you can block the 13 damage on the 1st turn, the 16 damage on the 2nd turn while it gains block, and then you could also block the 11 damage, you're probably in pretty good shape. This is really just a matter of surviving long enough that you can like slowly tick it down. Skulking Colony, a lot of times, I know I said the earliest you can kill it is in 4 turns, but most of the time, you know, it takes like 7-8 turns and you end up killing it. And as long as you have things in your deck like weak or just good block cards, Skulking Colony is not really scary at all. Now, I don't think I mentioned this during the Skulking Colony talk. This is the Underdox elites. As you know, Act 1 has 2 different acts. the Underdocs, and the Overgrowth. We're going to go over the 3 Underdocs elites, and then we're going to go over the Overgrowth elites. So the next one on our list is the Phantasmal Gardeners. This is a much harder fight than the Skulking Colony fight, but it's honestly very, very easy if you have some sort of AoE, and again, if you have decent block. What the Phantasmal Gardeners do is they put up a shield every time you hit them with damage. So if you hit them with the smallest amount of damage, they're literally just shielded up, and then you have to break the shield before they can take any more damage. It's basically that simple. They are giant pains in the ass because of that shield, but the good thing is they have a really low amount of HP. So if you have a very solid AoE attack, something like Breakthrough on Ironclad or Dagger Spray, or even Negative Pulse on Necrobinder, these AoE cards are going to kind of take them out really quickly. The biggest problem with this fight is that one of them gains strength, and then the next turn is going to sit there and multi-strike you. That's where this fight gets really, really scary. So my goal when I face the Phantasmal Gardeners is I actually target the one that's gaining strength, not the ones that are attacking on the first turn. Because as you can see, the pattern of attack, the first one deals 5 damage, the second one deals 7, the third deals 1 times 3, and then the fourth is going to gain 3 strength, and then everything's going to shift over 1. So the one that gains strength is going to deal the multi-strike attack next. The one that was dealing the multi-strike attack is going to be dealing 7 damage, and the first one is going to be the one gaining the strength next turn. I hope that makes sense the way I said it, but it's just basically a pattern where everything just shifts over one Phantasmal Gardener at a time. So my whole goal is to have that fourth one that was buffing itself on the previous turn dead by the start of turn 2, because I don't want to take 3 times 3 damage. That's when these Phantasmal Gardeners really get out of control. The only good thing is that each of the Gardeners has a low amount of HP, so you should be able to take out at least 1 to 2 of them by the second turn, in which case this fight just becomes a lot easier to handle. But you have to make sure that you have some sort of AoE in order to handle this fight, but you also want to make sure that you have good block, and you want to try and get something that has weak in it so that their bigger attacks, the multi-strike attacks, things like that are not hitting so hard. And the third Underdocs elite is Terror Eel, which I feel like this is the hardest one out of all 3 of the Underdocs fights. Terror Eel is very, 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 very scary, especially on the higher ascensions. 150 HP is really big. Once you bring Terror Eel down to 70 HP or 75 on the higher ascensions, it suddenly gets stunned, can attack on the next turn, and that's when you really just like kind of unload on him. So it's really the first half of the fight that's very scary, because he's dealing a ton of damage, and maybe you could block some of it, but the problem is that you can't just focus on block with the Terror Eel because the damage is so much, and he gains 6 vigor on that second turn. Vigor on even just his regular attack really makes things super difficult. You kind of have to try and burst him down as quick as possible in order to get him under that 70. And then you also want to burst him down after that, because once he comes back, he's applying 99 vulnerable to you, and he's going to come back at you with a huge attack. It's only that one huge attack when you're vulnerable that's scary and dangerous. But most of the time what I've found is I'm able to kill Terror Eel before that attack even is coming at me, because you have that turn where he's stunned after getting hit for 70. You have the next turn where he's buffing or he's debuffing you, and then he hits you with the big attack. So it kind of gives you like 2-3 turns before he's attacking you to take down the second half of his HP. That's why I say it's really only the first half of this fight that's really scary. You just have to like sort of take a few hits on the chin from Terror Eel because you kind of don't have much of a choice but to like knock them down. Unless you have just a colossal amount of block by the time you get to him. If you have the option to always block for 24, then the Terror Eel fight is really not that scary until the vulnerable gets put on you. And even then, if you were blocking that much, that big attack is probably not going to kill you because you probably have a lot of health because you have a ton of damage mitigation. It's really kind of a shift in attitude, I guess, because this fight is not that scary if you have a ton of block, and it's also not that scary once you stun him because you have a couple extra turns and you should be able to kill him before you get vulnerable. Now we're going to move into Overgrowth, which is also another Act 1. So I want you to be aware of which act you're going into in order to be able to kind of set yourself up when you're playing the game against elites. Because Overgrowth, these guys, you got to approach them very, very differently. I feel like the Underdox was a lot more defensive in nature and maybe a little less threatening, whereas Overgrowth is going to be a lot more of, you got to like hit these guys hard right away. For example, Bygone Effigy. Bygone Effigy, there is a specific strategy with this elite. First of all, they have slow. So whenever you play a card, this enemy receives 10% more damage from attacks this turn. You want to maximize that slow so that your attacks are dealing more damage. You want to make sure that the last attack you play is your strongest attack, because let's say you could play 3 1-cost cards. You play the first one, you play the second one. Well, now you're going to get a chance to play your biggest attack card for 1 energy that's dealing 20% more damage than it otherwise would have because you played those 2 previous cards. The other side of that is you don't always draw 3 attacks in a turn. Sometimes you only draw 2. In that case, you want to play something like a defend or a power before you play the attacks, because every single card you play gives you an extra 10% on the attack. So Bygone Effigy is really, really scary once they wake up. But the first turn, they're asleep. Nothing's going to happen on that first turn. You just beat them down. You just hit them with as much attack as you can. The next turn, they're still not attacking, but they're about to gain 10 strength. So you just keep beating them down on that second turn. Now the third turn is where things get really scary because they have 10 strength. They're dealing 15 damage plus 10. So they're dealing 25 on the higher ascension levels, 23 on the lower ascensions. Neither of those is a joke. So you want to burst down Bygone Effigy those first 2 turns as much as you can and hope that you don't have to set up too much. Then on the third turn, you're probably going to want to trade some HP to damage Bygone Effigy, because they're just going to constantly hit you with 25 over and over and over again. You want to make sure that you're maybe blocking for 10 or 12 instead of all 25, and you're taking like 13, but you're hitting them back with your own like 15 or 20. Bygone Effigy is definitely really tough, but very beatable because of that slow that's going to make your attacks a little better, and also because of those 2 turns that you can burst them down before he starts attacking. Byrdonis is the next Overgrowth enemy, and this one's also really scary and also very similar to Bygone Effigy in terms of they're attacking constantly and it doesn't stop. The only difference is Byrdonis does not start with 10 strength. Instead, at the end of its turn, it's going to gain 1 strength. But Byrdonis is probably more terrifying because every other turn, she's going to hit you with Peck. That is a multi-strike attack, and that strength gain every single turn is going to start adding up on that multi-strike attack. What you got to do is you really got to burst down Byrdonis. You're going to trade some HP to burst down her HP because you don't really have a choice. The good news about Byrdonis is that she has a little less HP than Bygone Effigy, a lot less HP, 37 on the higher ascension levels, but she also deals a lot more damage because of the peck, that's the multi-strike attack, and even swoop with an extra, X amount of strength is a big, tough attack. It's not as big as Bygone Effigies, but that peck is going to become bigger very, very quickly. You want to burst down Byrdonis as fast as possible, and you want to make sure that you're blocking as much as you can. In Overgrowth, you kind of have to go into these fights with more HP than you maybe would in terms of the underdogs, because these enemies hit a lot harder and they hit a lot faster. So typically in Overgrowth, unless I have a really, really well-built deck, I'm probably taking less elites. Like, I'm probably looking to take like 2 of these elites and not like 3 of them, or, sometimes you got to take 1 because they're just so strong. Just be aware of that as you're going through this. And the last of the Overgrowth elites is Phrog Parasite. I feel like Phrog Parasite is definitely the toughest one. You get Phrog Parasite. He starts with a very small amount of HP, but immediately adds infections into your discard pile, and then hits you with 5 times 4 damage on the higher ascension levels. So what you really need are things like Piercing Wail. You need to make sure you have weak for this fight because of that multi-attack. You want to kind of survive the front-loaded Phrog Parasite, and you want to kill it as quickly as possible. Even if you do have a lot of block, even if you do have a lot of damage over time, Phrog Parasite needs to be beaten right away, because adding 3 infections to your discard pile, then every other turn adding 3 more. If you don't kill this as fast as you can, you're never going to draw into your good cards. You're going to get those infections. Those infections deal damage to you. Everything is just really, really bad in this fight. This fight is just horrendous. And then once you actually beat it down, it has a small amount of HP at like 68 max on the higher ascension levels. Once you take him down, the 4 Wrigglers will pop out, but they'll be stunned. I know I just said you want to kill Phrog Parasite quickly, but if you can delay the kill on Phrog Parasite 1 extra turn so that you can hit him with 1 attack on the next turn, and then you can hit the Wrigglers, that's really beneficial for you because the Wrigglers will be stunned on that turn. Or if Doom kills the Phrog Parasite or Poison itself kills the Phrog Parasite, the Wrigglers will be stunned for an entire turn. So the 4 Wrigglers will not be able to attack you for 1 whole turn, and then you can go ahead and just unload some attacks on them, try and kill a couple of them. The Wrigglers in slots 1 and 3 are always attacking first, so try to kill one of them before they start their attacks. And the Wrigglers in slots 2 and 4 are going to put some infections into your discard pile while gaining strength. The best thing that you can do for this fight is have some form of AoE that's going to try and wipe these guys right away, because even on the highest ascension levels, they only have 22 HP. It's really not that hard to beat them, but it becomes really hard to beat them when you draw into all the infections, when you don't have any AoE, when you don't have enough block. It is kind of a pain in the ass. This, I think, is easily the hardest Act 1 elite fight out of either of the acts. At the moment, there's only one Act 2, and it's called Hive. And the first elite is the Infested Prism, which I think is probably the easiest of the Act 2 elites to get through. Not to say that it is easy, of course, but the big strategy point for Infested Prism, the first time you hit him with an attack, then you will gain 1 energy back. So make sure you hit him with at least 1 attack every single time. The only caveat to that is that if he has his shield up and he's blocking, you won't get the energy until he actually takes the attack damage. But on the turns that he's not shielded, make sure that you hit him for an attack so that you get that energy back and you could play your other cards out. In a sense, you're playing with 1 extra energy when you face this enemy. He's got a ton of HP, but you're getting a lot of free little shots at him that are going to help you tick him down over time. Other than that, he doesn't have anything too special. He does gain strength, but it happens every 4 turns. And you should be able to kind of like beat him down, burst him down before that. By Act 2, you have a little more scaling. You have a little more good damage. So Infested Prism isn't that scary as long as you have a reasonable amount of block, because he does hit very hard, especially on those multi-strike attacks. But he's by far the easiest of the Act 2 elites to get through. The next Act 2 elite is Entomancer, and Entomancer may very well be your easiest one to get through depending on the situation. Entomancer has Personal Hive, which means that whenever he's hit by an attack, you add a Dazed into your draw pile. If you are strictly an attack only deck, you are going to have a very bad time, because he is going to constantly be filling your deck with Dazed, and you are not going to be able to play a lot of cards after you hit him with like 4 or 5 attacks. He is very tough in those situations. If you have a deck like a poison deck, or you have a deck that builds Doom very quickly, Entomancer is the easiest Act 2 elite. Like, you can simply just kill him by blocking constantly and damaging him over time with poison or Doom or something like that. If you have that situation, you are in phenomenal shape against Entomancer. You just constantly block. He's got 155 HP on the higher ascensions, but it's not really that much of a problem if you kind of defeat enemies based on some sort of power cards or some sort of skill cards. Those are not going to be a problem. It's only when he gets attacked constantly that it becomes an issue. When you have too many attacks, and that's how your whole strategy is laid out, hopefully you have some sort of block cards or weak cards. Weak does really good against Entomancer because he's got the multi-attack that he hits you with. And in these situations, you want to just constantly make sure in your deck, you want to constantly check that deck to make sure, how many Dazed do I actually have? And what are the chances that I draw into an entire handful of them? It's okay to hit him with a few attacks here and there, especially if you have a lot of cards that maybe draw, because you can outdraw those Dazed if you have cards that can do that. You don't want to hit him like with 30 shivs and then put 30 Dazed into your deck, and he's not dead yet, but you're about to be. Now, it's important to note that at first, he's only putting 1 Dazed into your deck per attack. So early on, you can get away with hitting him with a few attacks a little more so than you can later on. Once he does the Pheromone Spit, he's going to gain strength, but also gain the amount of Dazed that he puts into your deck. So once he buffs himself, now all of a sudden every attack that you hit him with is going to have 2 Dazed that get put into your deck. And if it takes you even longer and he gets up to buff himself again, he's now going to put 3 Dazed into your deck every time you attack him. Just be aware of that with Entomancer. It is a very difficult fight if you're an attack only deck, and it's a very simple, reasonable, easy fight if you're not. Now, the toughest Act 2 elite is Decimillipede. I am sorry about how hideous this looks, but they do so much. There are so many different attacks and rules with Decimillipede, but it all kind of comes down to one simple thing. You want to spread damage across Decimillipede equally, and you want to make sure that you kill them all at the same time. If you go and like focus only on one of the sections of the Decimillipede, once you kill them, they're going to revive after 1 turn off. They're going to be dead for 1 turn, and then they're going to reattach. They're going to come back with 25 more HP, and you're going to have a really bad time because they're going to be constantly reviving themselves and not just all dying at once. For this fight, you have to make sure that you spread the damage equally across the board. And you also want to kind of make sure that you have cards that apply weak to the enemy because they do a lot of multi-strike attacks. They gain strength really quickly. They only have 52 max HP on the higher ascension levels. So in theory, it should be easier to get through, but that's only really if you have like AoE attacks. And that's really only if you spread like doom across all three of them equally, or poison or something like that. You don't really want to mess up the timing of this because it's better to kill all three at the same time, or to kill like one of them and then kill the other two on the next turn, or kill two of them and then the other one on the next turn. You want to make sure that all three sections are dead within the same like 2 turns. Otherwise, you're going to have a very rough time. They're going to keep reviving. You're never going to kill them, and they are eventually going to kill you because they strengthen themselves so much and they weaken you so much. So Decimillipede, definitely the toughest Act 2 elites, but you can get through them with AoE. And we're finally up to Act 3. The first elite we'll talk about is Soul Nexus. Soul Nexus has no special properties. Soul Nexus is just a big fat target with 254 HP and just deals a boatload of damage. The first attack on the higher ascensions is 31 damage. The second is 7 times 4, then 19, but then he applies vulnerable and weak to you. Your goal is just to kind of burst Soul Nexus down really quickly and potentially block whatever damage is incoming, or weaken him on the multi-strike attack turns. If you can kill him in 3 or 4 turns, you're golden. He's just like sort of a big beater meat sack that doesn't do anything particularly special, just has a lot of survivability and deals a lot of damage. But once you're vulnerable and once you're weak, it starts to get really difficult to beat him. So make sure that you deal a big time amount of damage on those first 3 turns so that you can kind of get away from that. Maybe not unscathed, but just taking a little damage. I have lost fights to Soul Nexus because I was not prepared to burst him down quick enough. And once he does the drain life and put vulnerable on me, he just beats me down real quick. Mecha Knight is a guy that's going to give you big time, huge attacks, just like Soul Nexus, except that he's not doing it every single turn. He is doing it on the first one. He's going to deal 30 damage. So you got to be prepared to block a decent amount on that first turn. Then he's going to add 4 burns to your hand. Then he's going to gain 15 block and 5 strength. Then he's going to turn around and deal 40 damage. Mecha Knight takes a little longer to ramp up. He does hit harder than Soul Nexus. He does have more HP than Soul Nexus. He is beatable more so over time. The only problem with that is the artifact. He starts with 3 artifacts that negate debuffs. If you're a poison deck, it is going to take you some time to knock all 3 of those artifacts off of him in order to be able to add your poison to him and build that up over time. Or if you rely a lot on weak, you're going to have to spend 3 weeks on this and knock those artifacts off in order to start to lower the amount of damage that he deals. Things like Red Mask or Bag of Marbles are very good at knocking those artifacts out. Those artifacts are a real pain in the ass, especially if you rely heavily on debuffs, which by Act 3, you probably are heavily relying on some sort of debuffs. A lot of times your scaling damage is like Poison, Doom, stuff like that. Or a lot of times your best damage mitigation cards are going to be weak. Or if you're Ironclad, you're using a lot of vulnerable. So the artifacts make Mecha Knight extra strong. And him adding those burns to your hand every like 4 turns starts to build up because he's got a lot of HP. You just gotta, in a sense, be patient in this fight, but also in another sense, you can't be too patient because those big time attacks are gonna come down on top of your head. Mecha Knight can get out of control very, very quickly, or rather very, very slowly, but it can beat you down. You just gotta have enough kind of burst and scaling that can break through that artifact first, and you'll be okay. And the final elites that we're going to talk about are some of the biggest pains in the ass in the entire game. You have the 3 knights, I guess they're called. I don't know. The Flail Knight, Spectral Knight, and Magi Knight. Magi? Magi Knight. I know the word, I swear. The big keys about these guys are that Flail Knight is just this big beater that's going to attack you with a big time amount of damage. Spectral Knight is going to turn all your cards into ethereal cards. So if you do not play them, they will exhaust. Your cards in your deck are going to exhaust if you're not careful after the first turn. And Magi Knight takes away the upgrades from your cards. Now, in my opinion, in this fight, most of the time, you actually want to kill the Magi Knight first because you want to make sure that your cards stay upgraded. By the time you get to Act 3, by the time you get to this fight, you probably don't realize how important your upgrades have been until this person starts taking the upgrades away. Because now all of a sudden your cards are not dealing as much damage, you're not blocking for as much, you're not scaling as much because those upgrades are gone. This is the most important one. I know it's very tempting for a lot of people to go and take out the guy that's making the cards ethereal, the Spectral Knight. But honestly, ethereal cards, sometimes it's good. You know, it's going to thin out your deck. You're going to play your most important cards. Occasionally you will lose something that you don't want to lose. That's something that's really important that you don't want to disappear off the face of the earth. But a lot of times the ethereal part of the cards, it's like, okay. Now, if you very specifically have a deck that can't afford to exhaust certain cards, then by all means attack the Spectral Knight first. From my own experience, I would take out the Magi Knight to make sure that your upgrades stay intact. And also, like, Magi Knight has the lowest amount of HP out of all of them, so in theory should be the easiest one to beat, though he does gain block every couple turns, so that extra shield is going to make him a little harder to beat. But I personally want to go after Magi Knight first and try and burst them down, try and kill them before that second turn is done. But you also want to protect yourself because on the other side, Flail Knight is over there beating you down with big ass attacks. He's going to be gaining 3 strength every 3 turns, but he is honestly the least important out of all 3. It goes Magi Knight, Spectral Knight, and then Flail Knight. But if you have AoE, it's going to make it a little easier to get through this as well. And by the time you're in Act 3, I'm expecting that you do have some sort of AoE, some sort of at least reasonable solution to attack multiple enemies. Make sure, again, Magi Knight, Spectral Knight, and Flail Knight, or occasionally Spectral Knight, Magi Knight, and Flail Knight. No matter what, Flail Knight is at the bottom rung. That is the last one that you want to attack. These guys are a pain in the ass, but if you take out Magi Knight first, you're probably going to have a much easier time than you realize. If you enjoyed this video, listen to Wango, man. Subscribe to the channel and go check out some of my runs and my other guides. I appreciate you watching. Enjoy yourself. Have a great rest of your day and give the video a thumbs up. Thank you.